I'm almost 50, strong, clear, energized. Training hard, living clean, fully alive. But it didn't start here. 30 years ago, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and I felt hopeless. But I chose a different path. No meds, just science, discipline, and results. Now I'm symptom-free and asking the tough questions that move us all forward. This is Hope and Health. Let's go. Hello and welcome to Hope and Health. Today, I'm talking to Shannon Stark, a registered holistic nutritionist and wellness educator whose daughter was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis as a teenager. Thank you so much for being with us, Shannon.
Well, thanks for having me. Yeah.
Now, let's jump right into it. What is it like to have your teenage daughter diagnosed with a disease like multiple sclerosis?
Yeah, I think if I could just go just before the diagnosis, I met Terry Walls 2 years before she was diagnosed. And I was at a conference just for my own health and to meet her and hear her story when Romy was diagnosed, when I just felt like I knew what to do. So even though it was, devastating, and I think I passed out on the floor at the hospital, I woke up and it was like, okay, we got a plan. So I was lucky.
So before we get into that, I'm going to back you up a bit. So for our audience who may not know who Dr. Terry Walls is, she is someone who is diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. She started a nutritional program and more or less has recovered. So you met Dr. Walls a couple years prior to your daughter's diagnosis of multiple sclerosis. So already you knew something about the disease, and fortunately, you knew a way out.
Absolutely.
So you pass out almost when the diagnosis happened. What else is going through your mind?
Just that I just wanted to get her out of the hospital so we could start the protocol. And we basically did start it the next day. And we went the third level. So she has different levels. So third level Walls protocol, and she was on board. We were both kind of freaked out. So we just started right away. And I think within a week, symptoms were gone.
Okay, so let's go back up a bit and let's talk about what kind of symptoms did your daughter have that made you go to the hospital?
Yeah, so it was July, and I remember she was having numbness and tingling down her arm, and I just thought it was, a pinched nerve like everyone else does, and then that kind of went away, and then it was the end of August, and I noticed that her eyes weren't working in unison, and I asked her, and she's like, oh, I got a bit of double vision when I looked to the left, and it wasn't enough for me to go, oh, it'll stop. I'm like, no, we gotta look into this. So it was ophthalmologist, and then they said, you might want to go down to Sick Kids in Toronto because we live 2 hours north, and I drove her right to Emerge, and they were kind of trying to send us away, but I kept showing them the video that I had done. And then finally, 3 days later, we had a diagnosis. And
okay, so what kind of video you did? So, already this sounds like you had to advocate for your daughter quite a bit. So she's got these objective symptoms. Her hands are tingling. You notice that her eyes aren't working properly, and you create a video?
I did.
And what was that like?
Yeah, I just had her, I said, Romy, you need to look at me, look to the left. Both of her eyes would move to the left. And I said, look to the right. And only one eye would move to the right. And
wow.
Yeah, so it was pretty scary. And, other people were saying, oh, don't worry about it. It's, kids on their phones. And I'm like, my gut, I knew this was deeper and more neurological. So I said, we got to get her looked at. And even the ophthalmologist was kind of like, don't worry about it. And I'm like, no, I actually yelled at him. So that wasn't, my best moment. But it was just, I knew there was something going on.
What's the path to get a diagnosis for multiple sclerosis for a teenager?
Yeah. So she was given a neurologist at Sick Kids. It was all fear-based. It was very upsetting being at the appointments. And I just felt like this isn't healing, or this isn't, this is scare and fear. And, here's 5 medications, go home and pick one out. And, I had a little bit of research background, but not when it's your kid. And so it was just fear, a lot of fear.
Well, let's talk about that. So you're brought into a neurologist's office. I'm going to assume there was an MRI and other tests. What kind of fear tactics were used against you?
Well, this was one of my favorite ones. So we came in and, of course, they bring up the MRI and pointing out the lesions. And this might have been the third appointment in, and I still had said no to any medications. And so, of course, at Sick Kids, if anyone's been there, you know that you have your neurologist and then they have their team with their clipboards around you. So it's really intimidating. And you're sitting there like, you're the dumb mom, and even though it's like, no, I have a bit of education here in healthcare. So it's like, she said, like, you need to pick a drug. And I said, you know what? I don't think so right now. Not right now. I never said no. I just said not right now. Then she turned and said, well, the young boy that was in here before you, his parents decided not to give them a medication. And now he's had an event and he's permanently disabled. And, I just went, well, what were the parents? Okay, if they weren't doing the medications, what were they doing? Like, were they still taking them to McDonald's? Were they looking at diet? Were they looking at all these factors? And when I asked that question, she got kind of, I don't talk about other patients. And I was like, well, you just did. So, so when it was in her best interest, then it was okay to talk about other patients, but not when it was, well, what were they doing?
Now, do you think that the fear tactics were used so you would take a medication?
Absolutely. Yep. Each time we said no, the next appointment, the neurologist stopped coming in. I don't think she was happy with me. And she was just sending other people in. And I ended up writing a letter because they kept asking me the same questions over and over. And I said, here's a letter. So the next time I went in and they're like asking me the question, I said, well, if you open her file and read the letter there, you'll see our thoughts on everything. Because I'd done a lot of research on all the medication that they offered. And, each of them had like 9 pages of side effects and no proof that it was going to stop the disease or, so it was like, any decision you make, there's a risk. So I decided we'll take the path, the risk with the least side effects. So.
Now, what's it like? I mean, you're not a doctor. You're not at the time, you're not a nurse. You don't have a healthcare background, and you have to make the decision for what drug you're going to put your daughter on.
Yeah.
How challenging is that?
I have to say that's probably the worst thing as a parent or anyone having to make a decision for someone else's body, and so that was really hard. Like, I'm not a controlling person and I know what I would do and I would go based on my gut. So I just had to apply it to her and, hope for the best and know that, we could always change course. If something wasn't working, you change course, So it was devastating, but I put on my big girl pants and I said, we got to go to work here. We got to look up stuff and we got to look at all the things in our environment, not just food, but, where was our Wi-Fi set in our house? Where was, what was our stress levels really like, as a teenager? And, there's so many things we looked at.
So you started looking at other things. You started looking at diet. You started looking at environmental factors. What was the first thing you changed?
Diet was absolutely first because that's coming in every day, 3 times a day, if not more. So diet was first. Then it was looking at, where's the smart meter on the house? Where's the modem in the house? And it was actually in the basement, under her bed, under her head, so it was like, wow, so we had to move that to the other side of the house. We put it on a timer, and then I looked into sleep studies. I ended up putting her in a hammock, so she slept in a hammock for about 5-6 years just because of the healing of that rocking effect of, I was reading studies out of Switzerland on, rocking beds. So I'm like, you're going in a hammock, so it was just everything from sleep, her food, what was going on around her. Then we started to dig deeper into the gut health and then, metals and toxins and, hormone levels. It's just the whole array. I think it was Palmer Coppola. Her and I were having a chat and she was asking me all the steps I was taking with her. And as I was listing them, she was writing down and she's like, are you writing a book? And I said, no plans of writing a book. So that's where she came up with her fights, her trademark of food, co-infections, gut health, hormones, toxins and stress. So, and then I kept making the list longer, right? With upper cervical chiropractor, and just kept going and going. Yeah.
So for you, you left no stone unturned when it came to researching for your daughter.
Not that I know of, but I'm sure there's more, and I'm going to keep going. Yep.
Now let's talk about those diet changes. I too was diagnosed as a teenager, and so I know how challenging it can be to suddenly reset your diet at that stage. How challenging was that for you and your daughter?
Probably a little bit more challenging for her, but I had already been sort of paleo, but I was already in that nutrition world of, I was grain-free. I did a little bit of dairy here and there, like, high fat quality dairies, but generally really good foods. The family, not so much. So to switch them over or switch Romy over to my diet, it was fairly easy. And she got interested in cooking, and then she started to create like incredible gluten-free, dairy-free meals. So she was never, ever deprived. So it's a good thing I had that few years before her. So
let's get into the specifics. What diet did you implement?
So it was Terry Wald's level 3. So we were it was just meat, all quality protein meats and a little bit of dairy. She soon found out after that probably it wasn't the best thing for her. I know the Wald protocol doesn't call for eggs, but we had chickens, so we were doing our eggs. And so she was okay if egg was in a dish, but not so much like just an egg on the plate. Lots of greens, lots of fruit. As if her Terry Wald's pyramid, we were just following it to a T. So all the sulfur vegetables, sulfur vegetables and teenagers a bit hard. So I was just making soups for her, which everyone loved. Then the nuts and seeds and her few sweets. And she doesn't have a huge sweet tooth, so that was nice. And so, yeah, it was just very meat, vegetables, fruit, some nuts and seeds, and healthy fats.
Okay, so she's got these neurological symptoms, tingling in the hands, eye coordination issues. You implement this diet, which is more or less a Dr. Wald's diet. And again, for people who don't know, Dr. Wald's is I would say very famous now person with multiple sclerosis who has a diet program. What kind of results did you start to see?
Yeah, so I guess a piece I didn't mention because she was going into high school when she had the tingling. So she was going into grade 9 that July and August. I had also, Romy was an A student all through school. But at the end of grade 8, her math was like falling into the C's, and I didn't know what I was dealing with. Am I dealing with teenage attitude, laziness, or is there something else going on? I hired a tutor, and even, sort of in the background watching her with the tutor, she just looked like a deer in the headlights, like she wasn't getting the concepts of, and I'm thinking, what is going on? So that's still before the diagnosis. We get home from Sick Kids in Toronto. She starts the protocol the next day. She also had a lumbar puncture, so she was out for a few days too, not feeling well. And the next week I said, well, maybe we should start looking at catching up on your math. And she's like, yes. She sat down, she whizzed through that math so fast, and I checked it all and it was all perfect. And I was like, Romy, like, what's changed here? And she's like, I don't know, Mom. I just feel like my brain woke up. And I thought, wow, that was pretty cool. So that was just diet, nothing else at that point.
Wow, so some big cognitive changes as well.
Yeah, she's just like, oh, I feel awake.
And what about the tingling and the issues with the eye? What did you start to see there?
Yeah, that cleared. That was actually cleared up before we got to Sick Kids, so that's why there was a bit of a fight to get the diagnosis, because they're, oh, she's fine now. But no, I had two things now, so I knew something was coming up if we didn't go.
Now, your journey progressed. What other things did you start to learn to take care of her health?
Yeah, so I ended up working with another holistic nutritionist in our area, and he was doing live blood with her. So we were seeing that there was a lot of chemicals and a lot of parasites and other things going on in her system. So then I just started going through we need to start with, her gut health. I know her diet was good. Now let's make sure she's digesting, absorbing, and assimilating all this good stuff we're giving her, because she had a lot of digestive issues. So we worked on gut health. She had leaky gut. So we started working on leaky gut protocols, because anyone who has, people can have leaky gut and not have autoimmune. But if you have autoimmune, you have leaky gut. So you need to fix that. So that was one of our first steps there. Then we started doing, I did hair analysis with her, and she was loaded with heavy metals. Like some of them were off the charts. So we had to do a lot of metal detoxing, and that took about 9 months. So we were doing mud baths. We were doing foot baths, everything, just different supplements. And that was through a holistic nutritionist because I wasn't, in that field yet. I was just watching it all. Castor oil packs were huge for her because she had some other issues with liver. So yeah, it was we just kept going down, knocking things off. It took time, but kids are resilient. So she was responding pretty fast to everything we're doing. Then I decided I wanted to take her to Arizona to the American Center for Biological Medicine.
Okay.
Yeah. So
why go there?
Dr. Dixon Tom, he was a dentist and now he's a naturopath. And I just had heard a lot about that clinic. So I thought and it was sort of, it wasn't taking her to Spain or anything. I didn't have that kind of funds. So I saved for about 3 years and then I took her down to Arizona. We were there for a week in a clinic and they do a lot of assessments and then treatment. So she was in the clinic from 8 a.m. until about 5 or 6 p.m. doing different treatments. So for 5 days.
So how old is she at this point?
So she was diagnosed at 14. So she was 17 when we were in Arizona.
Okay, so 3 years later, now you left Canada. You've gone to another clinic that you found. What did those assessments yield?
I wasn't allowed in because they really focus on the nervous system and they don't want the mom there upsetting the child. I know they were doing a lot of sound bed therapy. They were doing, they found liver flukes. So they were giving her injections into her liver to get rid of these parasites. They were doing, there was so many things, but like I said, I wasn't in the room there. I just got a piece of paper saying this is what she's doing right now. And so, hydrotherapy, IV therapy, ozone therapy, all kinds of stuff.
So, I mean, no rock that was not overturned by you.
No.
You kept searching. Now, what about low dose naltrexone? Was that another part of your journey?
Yeah, that was... you start looking into immune suppressant drugs. Well, what about immune modulating drugs? And, just to keep the immune happy, not totally suppress things. So I don't even know how that came into my realm, but then I started really reading into it and trying to understand what it was and what it was about. So with the normal dosing, that's 50 milligrams, and they use that for drug therapies, right? And so what it does, it blocks our opioid receptors, and then our body's like, oh, we need to make more. And then you have that helps with pain, it helps with autoimmune. So I thought, well, that's interesting. And then with the low doses, those are like 3 to 5 milligrams. And it was her naturopath in Arizona that would prescribe it. So we got a lot when we were there to bring back with us. And then after that, it was hard to get some because you have to get a diagnosing doctor. At this point, I had fired her neurologist, and that was a scary thing to do. So she didn't have a neurologist. So that was our doctor in Arizona.
Okay, so let's stop there for a second. You fired the neurologist.
Yeah.
So how does that work? Was your neurologist not on board? Were you having challenges? And then what leads to firing them?
Yeah, you go into the appointment. Like I said, it's all fear-based. You leave there scared and really questioning, what you're doing in life, and with this child. And then you go into it with her holistic nutritionist, or you go into it with her naturopath, and you leave there and you're just so hopeful. And that in itself, leaving fearful, that's not healthy, and then coming out and being happy. And I finally, when I got on with Dr. Dixon Tom, I said to him, I don't want to go there anymore, and he's like, well, don't, and I thought, oh, it's that simple. We can do that. And sure enough, I was like, they wanted to do an MRI with contrast. And I said, no more contrast. She's only had contrast twice. And they said, oh, you have to do contrast. And I said, I do?
Yeah. And for people who don't know, a contrast is what they use in an MRI so they can see things in the central nervous system, whether there's lesions and things like that. But again, what a lot of people also don't know is that it can cause inflammation. This is well documented, science-based, and they don't often tell you that when you go get an MRI, do they?
No. It'll be out of your system in 24 hours. This is, so we can, see a better picture. Romy really reacted, like she would throw up and not do well. And I'm like, we're not doing this anymore. And in fact, I even read a study where it causes lesions. So it's like, why are we doing this? So I was just like, no, we're done with this. Anything that posed a risk in that way, it just didn't make sense. When I said we weren't doing the contrast, they were like, you have to do the contrast. And I said, okay, cancel the MRI. And then put me on hold and come back. We can do the MRI without contrast. Yeah, I thought so. So
Right.
yeah, you have to, they didn't like me at all. So anyway, I finally just, they were making an appointment and I said, we won't be coming there anymore. And I said, we're good. Thank you. And I hung up. You have to be really assertive and you're calm in the front, but your heart's pounding out of your chest inside. But you just have to advocate for them and make sure that, you're putting them on a good path to where you want to see them in their future. But yeah, it was a scary thing, but I look back and I'm pretty proud of myself to do that. So,
Shannon, you have two totally different experiences, one with your neurologist and the other with your naturopath. With the neurologist, it's fear-based, it's pushing you towards a drug. With your naturopath, you're leaving with hope and a sense that your daughter is going to have an incredible future. So you fire your neurologist. What happened after that?
we just put that behind us and we just started working with the naturopath 100%, and she was getting results and she was happy and healthy and so once I made the decision, it was final. So it was the leading up to and the fear of, I know we live in Canada, but there's that fear, are they going to come and take my child away if it's because I'm not doing what they want to do? So there was those types of fears, but no, it was a good decision, and once we made it, it was done and behind us. We never thought about it again.
So let's talk about that. I mean, you're actually scared that the government could come take your child by just firing your neurologist and going a different way with your daughter's health?
Yeah, well, I had heard some stories in the States that they can come in and take your child and, take, I don't know, if it's like sort of a temporary custody and then give them cancer treatments or whatever, So it was those things like, can that happen here? Like, how far do I have to go against the grain for someone to step in and stop me? You don't know. You just kind of keep plugging forward. So.
Now, was this whole thing a huge wake-up call to you too, personally? I watched it with my own family.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at photographs of my parents before my diagnosis and a year after, it's unbelievable. Like you, they had to do tons of research for my own health. We as an entire family changed our diet. And my parents went along with the journey with me. They changed their diet. They changed, a lot of things in their life. They transformed themselves physically as much as I did. For them, it was this whole experience of me being diagnosed with MS as a teenager changed our whole family. Was it similar for yours?
Absolutely. Like, all of our health got better, and we just worked together and, watching, Romy thrive, you're doing the right thing. So yeah, it was just, we all sort of got on board with it just to make her life not feel so alien, So.
And you were outspoken. I mean, I recall years ago, I'd see you on social media. You actually tried to get this information to other people. Now, why did you choose to do that?
I think I'm just a big sharer. So I'm always sharing information, and there's some passion there, and maybe, the passion may be driven a bit by, anger, frustration. It's like, well, wait a minute, there's other ways out there. I've had some experience with health, my own health, and I've seen, the different paths. I spent 6 weeks in China and I was healed by a doctor who didn't even touch me. And it was the strangest experience. So I knew there were other things out there. Every time I lifted a stone and found new information, I just wanted to share it. Like, people don't have to suffer. There's other things to do. And the more you share, then the more comes back to you too.
And how did you find out about MS Hope, and how did that change your journey?
Yeah, just digging and digging. Like, even though we had the Walls protocol, I just thought there's got to be more out there. I saw MS Hope. I watched one of your videos, and it was just so empowering. And I was like, this is what we need. We just need this, this empowering feeling, and that's what heals people. And I was like, Romy, do you want to watch these videos? And we sat at the kitchen table and we watched every one, and it was like we were high-fiving each other, and because we just felt we're on the right path. This is the right thing for us. And then then we wrote you a little text or a little message saying thank you, and then that's when we ended up meeting that in Toronto.
That was almost a decade ago, if you can believe it.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
a decade has passed. Those first 3 years, you're in Arizona. You're doing all of these types of things. You're testing your hair. You're getting rid of the toxins, the parasites, the metals, totally transforming the diet. I mean, massive lifestyle change. How hard has it been to stay on it?
Romy was pretty committed, and she stayed on it about 8.5, 9 years. She was pretty like, this is the way to go. Then friends and more socializing and college first and university. And then I noticed like she would get like these weird headaches, or she would get optic neuritis. And I'm like, what's going on, Romy? Because, she's also an adult at this time too. So, and I just felt, are you following the protocol? Well, no, so she was starting to get a little, it was getting difficult for her. And then she started to have a few relapses to the point where she even stopped taking the supplement protocol she was on. And that was super hard, because she had been in, she's in Terry Wall's cookbook, as a big example, or a Wall's Warrior story. And, so a lot of people looked to her that knew us that, oh, wow, this kid can do it. I can do it. If, a teenager can do it, I can do this. So for her to really just change course and then started having relapses, then she had a big relapse. About 1.5 years ago, she ended up in the hospital. She couldn't use her hands, could barely walk. So
I mean, I think we should unpack this a little bit, if that's okay. I mean, this can be a hard conversation.
It is.
But I think it's really worth having, because for me, I mean, if people follow me on social media, I have a no cheat days philosophy. I firmly believe that these protocols have to be followed incredibly strict. And I think that's a huge challenge for a lot of people. And rather than, getting all like, how can you go off it? We just need to look at critically, like, this is hard. This is a lifetime commitment. It's very challenging. Instead of blaming or, going after people for not sticking on it, we need to learn how can we help people stay on it? What are the things that are, getting people to stray from it? Because from my own personal experience, I can tell you, if I put a food in there that's not going to work, I know almost right away. I mean, I can quickly start to feel things are off, but I also know if I stop it, I'm back to where I was in full health pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So you saw things, she started to go off the protocol. How quickly did the MS start to come back? Yeah.
When she started to tell me, because it was all kind of hidden from me, because they knew I'd be upset. Not that I would be controlling or angry, but I'd be upset because Romy realized the amount of work that her and I did, and so her lapse, when she finally started talking to me about it, I think it was she can go about 6 months, and then she would have a symptom, being off the diet. And, then the big one was, it was about 8 months she was off. So, and I didn't know at the time. This is sort of after the fact, I got the information and started to piece it all together. And
so went off the protocol for about 8 months, and then all of a sudden, big relapse.
Yeah, she was like, and again, we're back at, now she's an adult, so she's not at Sick Kids in Toronto anymore. So we were in Barrie at RVH, and they put her on 5 days of like high dose steroids, and the doctor said, she might not get this function back. And, that was devastating. She did. And, but yeah, then she got a new neurologist. I don't go to the appointments. That's her stuff now. And she said that the decision I made to not put her on the medications 10 years ago was the right decision. So for the neurologist to say that, I was like, okay, at least she understands where I'm at. She's giving the low-dose naltrexone to Romy now, so I'm happy with that. But yeah, it's devastating, because you've done all this work and people are looking at you, as like, you can do this, and then you fall off. So it's hard. And when she described how she was feeling, just the pressures of university and studying and keeping up with that cooking, and I have to support her, So I said, Romy, whatever you need to do, but what I do know is I taught her. So if she needs, at some point she comes back to, I know how to do this without medication. So she did pick a medication, and she's been on it for a year.
How challenging was that to see?
It was, I didn't do anything in front of her, but, I did go to my room. I did kind of have a little cry and just feel like, how did I fail her? And then I realized that, this, again, back to, this is her body. It's her choice. And I just have to be supportive. And I just focused on the fact that I did my best. And this is just a step off the path that I wanted her to be on. And I know that she can step back on. So, it's early days. It's only been a year and a bit that she's been on the medication. She's 24. The 2 years, she can say, you know what, Mom, I don't want to be on that anymore. Let's go back to this protocol. She's an adult. She can do it. She doesn't have to come to me, but at least she knows. She has the info. She knows.
There's going to be people watching this podcast who don't have multiple sclerosis, but might have a loved one in their life that do, and have information that they feel could possibly help that person, and that person doesn't want to listen at that point in the journey. That can be really frustrating for someone. Can you share what you do to work against that?
To see people not even open their eyes to another possibility, when you see them suffering, that's really hard. And I think I just matured over time. The information's there. If you want it, it's there. And I've stopped pushing it on people. I have people come to me, and then I'm like, share away. But, if, say I get diagnosed with cancer, if I feel the chemo is going to help me, and if that's where I have my hope, then it is, or if I feel I'm going to go more natural route, it's what you feel inside that's going to help you. So that's where it comes down to. So it's not all the outside stuff, all the information, it's there. And if they want it, they'll be open to it. If they're not, then you just have to, just hope the best for them, and maybe they come around.
In my journey, I so many people contact me as well. And I think where I've just gotten to is all I can do is put the information out there. What the individual decides to do with it is totally up to them.
Yeah.
But difficult to do when you're a parent.
Yeah. When you saw the results that she was getting, just with some few diet changes, and then that becomes hard for them. And I get it. There's times where, I can, I don't eat grains. I'm very, not paleo, but, I do eat very sort of animal based, I guess, with lots of fruit and a good sourdough. It's hard, to kind of say, oh, I can't have that. Or if I eat it, I'm going to have a reaction. And sometimes you just make that choice. Okay, I'm going to have this and I'm going to suffer tomorrow, but is it worth it? It's always this risk of everything you do. But yeah, it's hard to know that it's just so simple, but it's not too, so it's mindset.
And for you, how do you stay disciplined? You've been in this a long time too. What are the techniques that you do to stay on track?
I have, my issues are, different than autoimmune, but, I know how I feel when I go off my diet. I wake up every morning. I do my, my salt water drink. I'm out grounding every morning in the morning sunlight. So I do this. When I go off it, I don't feel good, so it's the same thing, I know how I feel. So it just keeps it simple for me. I make sure what I have in my fridge is the only thing I can eat. So it just makes it simple when you open the door and, oh, I can have anything in there. So you just got to reframe it. It's not focusing on all the things you can have. You focus on what can I have and what can I do. So you just eliminate that and make it simple.
For a parent who's watching this, whose child was recently diagnosed with MS or another chronic illness, what would your number one piece of advice be?
Always go back. Start with food. Look at the diet. Don't look at the big picture. Just bite off a little piece, change that till it becomes habit. It's not a death sentence, even though my reaction when I heard it, that's what it felt like. But it's not. I look 10 years later and she's in university, thriving and happy and has a boyfriend. And, so it's like, to see that and go through 10 years, it's like, we're all handed a set of cards that we have to deal with. So you just work through it. And yeah, it's not a death sentence, and just take it slow. Don't make any rush decisions. Don't go on the fear. Don't listen to the fear. That's the hardest one.
And how important is it to advocate for your child?
Oh, it's the biggest importance, right? So they don't know what they're up against. And so no, you have to advocate. Even if it's, as simple as, I was trying to save money to get her to Arizona, and someone had, so I'm selling stuff, like I'm doing it myself. And then someone said, oh, put a GoFundMe out there. And I was like, I'm not asking for money from other people. Like it was just felt, no, I'm not doing that. And then this woman said, it's not for you. It's for your daughter. And I just thought, all right, GoFundMe. So once you just change it, I'm not asking for money. I'm advocating for my kid and her health. So yeah, just do what you can for them. Yeah.
Shannon, I'm curious where you're going next. You're now doing this podcast, which is going to be broadcast to people all over the world. Where is this going for you?
So I was getting a lot of people contacting me, and then locals, Shannon's helped her daughter and you have this, maybe you should go talk to her, and I'm not, I'm just some girl down the road, and then I thought, what, maybe I need to do something with this, because I was passionate about it. I love it. So I went back to school. I went to the Canadian School of Natural Nutrition, became a registered holistic nutritionist. I just really dove into it and then started my own practice.
Well, Shannon, I really want to thank you for sharing this part of the journey, because I know this is not an easy one. This is not an easy part of the journey, especially if your daughter's having symptoms again and struggling. I do think it is as important as we share stories who people who, when they change their diet and they recover, I think it's just as important to learn about what happens when you go off the protocol.
She did so well for so long, and then it's almost like, you're put on a medication, I feel fine, you stop the medication, you're not fine, so it's that same thing, but just you're not doing a medication, you're living a lifestyle with food and diet and movement and mindset. And to see her go off that and just how simple it can be, and then and how quickly the MS, symptoms came back. Yeah, it's devastating. It's so hard. And it was one of the things that I kind of shy away from when people are, oh, how's your daughter? Oh, she's great, and she's like drug free. And then I have to, no, she made a decision with her neurologist. She picked a drug and she's doing that now. And they, people are kind of taken aback, and you feel like you failed them, and it's like, no, it's not that the program didn't work. She wasn't doing the program, and she chose to stop the program. It's so difficult. It's almost like you feel some shame, that you're.
And I think that for me, this is a really important conversation, because I publicly shared another podcast. I've struggled with alcohol at one point in my life. The next film that we're about to release, the follow-up to Living Proof, is going to really dig into that. We're going to be sharing how hard it is to stay on the program. I went through a very difficult time and had the consequences of it. And why I've chosen to make the film that way and to share that is to get into this, to show that there shouldn't be shame in this. This is part of the journey, no matter who you are. When you are diagnosed with something as a teenager, the long-term consequences of that is very hard to articulate to people. What that does to how it disrupts your adolescent years, the things that you lost, the experiences that you lost, the ability to relate to young people the same way. I think these are things we don't talk about. And suddenly you find yourself in the 20s and the 30s and almost like you're trying to relive those lost years, and that can have consequences on your long-term health. Now, I can share that I woke up. That for me in my journey, I recognized I had to go back because I knew if I continued down that path, it was just going to get worse and worse and worse. Don't know where things are going to go with your daughter. Don't know. We were hoping for the absolute best for her. But I want to make it super clear that this is normal, I think. I think this is all part of the journey that all of us are having to reach optimal health. We're going to have our ups and downs, and we don't know where it's going to go.
Yeah, it was really hard, but I've come to a place where I respect her. I respect her decision, and I understand how hard it is. She's 24, and yeah, from grade 9 to 8 years ago, like she was doing things that most adults can't even do. So I really just go, good on you for doing that. And I think she'll go back there, as she kind of gets back past this phase of life, then she'll be, maybe I can do that again, or, look at her health in a different way, not like, oh, let's just mask this so that I can live like a normal university kid. And it's very difficult.
Well, Shannon, thank you so much for talking with us today. I want to congratulate you on everything you've done. You're a true warrior in this space, and thanks again.
Thank you for having me, Matt.
Thanks for joining us. Hope and Health is made possible through generous donations. To learn more or support the show, visit mshope.com, where you'll find free science-based resources.